How can a normal-sized human woman give birth to a giant baby without being destroyed in the birthing process? Were
Yeah.
these huge hybrid offspring taken by cesarean section? And did many of the human women die in childbirth? Were
Yeah.
hybrid females large enough to carry and deliver their offspring to full-term delivery without trauma?
Well, if you're a human and you're delivering a giant baby, whether it's the offspring of the gods or a giant impregnating a human, it's the same issue with the baby. I mean, you can say an angel can take a smaller size as a changeling, but the baby is still going to be born quickly according to the tradition and born walking and would be very quickly too big for the humans. So let's tackle that one first. So in the Kebra Nagast, which is the Ethiopian version of the Old Testament that they said they received down through the Queen of Sheba from Solomon, they have the antediluvian women dying in a ritual of like a Caesarean birth. And so they would cut the bellies open and the women's die, and these become, because of what they did and the willfulness to participate in the violation of the laws of creation, to create demigods, physical and immortal spirits in the physical world, they become sirens that the book of Enoch talks about.
I was going to bring that up. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and where the mermaid thing is connected into that same mythos. So that's why I kind of say they're a little bit different than the elementals. So now, getting back on topic again, because we could go crazy on that for a while, but we'll try to stay focused. So one presumes that females who would have mated with Nephilim before the flood and females that would have mated with gods and or giants after the flood would have the same issue. Now, in terms of how so the women's would all die. The women would all die. Now, you also have the issue of the size of the male component to deliver the semen. So what we see in the Middle East are these rituals where there is semen that is being poured into women from a vial.
Whoa.
So one deduces is that's how they got around that, likely with the giants. Gods, if they wanted to keep their size, they would have to do that too, one would think. So so that's one way you would create babies, but the women are still going to die, right? Well, here's the other thing, though, is that we don't talk about this from a biblical basis, female giants, very often. And there were female giants that were born in other cultures, and like the Titanides that they're called in Greek mythology. And so they would have been able to produce babies easier because they'd be the same size as the giants. So that would be how you would say they would have done it, before the flood, and maybe and to a certain degree after the flood. So the question gets to be: is biblically, can we make a case for giant females? And the answer is yes, we can. And that's why Genesis 36 is so important, because it's not part of the table of nations in Genesis 10 or First Chronicles. But we need this information to make sense of what's going on in the Bible, because you get other genealogies in there. So the Horim are the ones who are the dukes of Edom that are going to intermarry with Esau and the Edomites. And so Esau is going to marry Oholibama, a Horim, giant. And Eliphaz is going to marry Timnah, also daughter of Seir, the chief of the Horim in the Seir region, whom Seir is named after. And Seir goes back to, you're going to love this, the Hebrew word satir.
Old goat man.
Old goat man. And of course, they were hairy too. So
sure.
And so this would be a pure blood female, and females were one of the issues after the flood versus before the flood, where their fertility issue to reproduce issues, which becomes problematic, is not through the ovaries or the semen, they just can't produce enough females. So God has done something to restrict how the giants reproduce versus how they're able to reproduce in huge numbers. And in the Greek versions, there was more giants than humans at one time. That's how much they could reproduce. If just using the polytheist account, but it sort of fits. And so Timnah, they create the hybrid Amalekites, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now if you have two humans intermarrying with giants, you don't have any of these issues in terms of size for the act or the baby being delivered. So those are the two main ways that you would have giants being born before and after the flood.
Wow. I after reading that section in your book where you talk about that birthing process a little bit and what happened to these women, I always pictured like the movie Alien, like a xenomorph just kind of out of the stomach there.
Yeah, and again, that's an allegory for what they're talking about. I mean, look at this. Look at that cone head on the alien.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. And
Wow.
it didn't take long to go through that pregnancy, which is another allegory reflecting their history. And of
It's
course,
really
aliens are part of the whole physical disguise and physical mythos of the offspring of the fallen angels. So yeah, of course, it's going to fit.
when you look
And
at the artist behind the xenomorph, his art and what is very, very clear demonic influence inside there, it's like they're all but telling you, this is what happened, folks. This is how it all took place.
Yep.
Wow. There is an interesting thought process that Timothy Alberino supplies also for how you could have a human woman giving birth to this giant without dying. And he posited that there could be possibly the child be born of small size, but being that it had this angel DNA within it, it just grew very rapidly. But you mentioned
that's a possibility as well. We don't get any accounts of that, whether it's monotheistically or polytheistically, but it's a sound theory.
Yeah. Now, what was you mentioned the tome? It was Tebran Nagast. Was that what it was?
The Kebra, Kebra Nagast.
Kebra Nagast. I'll have to look that up.
Negast. You can get copies of that. I have them, but sometimes they're split up. But yeah, it should be available, but you'll have to do some looking to get it.
Gotcha. Very good. Check that one out, folks.
So with the Canaanites, we get another example within the Table of Nations where males are going to intermarry with female giants, just as like Nimrod likely did to create those bloodlines. So we have 9 patriarchless tribes in the Table of Nations: the Amorites, the Jebusites. So daughters of Canaan, daughters of Heth, daughters of Sidon would have intermarried with Rephaim patriarchs. And we know Rephaim patriarchs aren't listed in the Table of Nations, just like those patriarchs in Genesis 36 weren't, because Rapha for the Rephaim in Genesis 14 and 15 as a tribe, and also generic for giant, is not listed as the patriarch in the Table of Nations. And Arba, the patriarch listed in the book of Joshua for the Anakim, isn't listed in the Table of Nations. And so the Amorites would have been from probably a name like Amur that shows up in the Ugaritic text. And Amur is both a Baalim and a giant. There's the offspring of Amur. And of course, Amorite goes back to Amorai, which is very similar to Amur in the spellings, or a name very, very close to that, and would have received their names eponymously from the Rephaim patriarch.
Far out. I think I want to say Josephus did a little bit of writing on some of those other lineages. I remember, I forget which book of his it is, but he talked specifically about the lineage of Ham. I found that to be very interesting as well.
Yeah. Josephus did some very good work.